This is our third annual awards this year. We give 5 awards every year, one for the Sustainable Business of the Year, one for the Sustainable Nonprofit of the Year, one for the Sustainable New Venture of the Year, one for the Sustainability Advocate of the Year, and one for the SBC Volunteer of the Year. And I'm going to present the first 4 of those to lucky members of our audience tonight. The first award that I'd like to give is the Sustainable Business of the Year. We chose this particular entity. Well, we choose all of our award winners based on their ability to address all 3 pieces of the sustainability picture. The first one, almost all businesses do anyway. It's they're focusing on economics and making their business economically viable. But the next 2 aren't typically addressed by all businesses. The first one is concern for the environment, and the second one is concern for social issues, and in particular for us, the community of Missoula. And so we're looking for entities that are actively involved in environmental and social issues here in this community. Our sustainable business this year is an entity that's been in Missoula for quite a while and has been operating in an arena that provides an environmental service for us all. In the last few years, they've also taken on the challenge of trying to educate our youth about their particular issue, which is recycling. And in doing that, their method has been to bring recycling into all of our schools through a Recycling in Schools program. And for those of you who haven't guessed by now, our award winner this year is Missoula Valley Recycling. And if I can have Tom. Tom Ernst of Missoula Valley Recycling, we are giving you the Sustainable Business of the Year for 2007 awards. And again, it's because Missoula Valley Recycling, in addition to being involved in their own business, they're actively involved in other community measures like recycling in schools, and also I believe they're doing some document destruction right now with Opportunity Resources, which helps give the opportunity for handicapped individuals that work at Opportunity Resources to have a job. So he's supporting the community in a number of ways that we're real excited about. Did you want to say anything here? I've been rambling on.
I don't have a speech prepared, but it's a real honor to receive this award from the community, the sustainable business community, and it's been a big shot in the arm since we learned about it for everybody at Missoula Valley Recycling, and we hope that we can. I think we're all going to try a little harder to do what we've been doing. Our Recycling in the Schools program has, we didn't even know people really knew about it. We haven't gotten any press or any big articles in the paper, and to get this recognition is really a thrill. So, thanks.
You're welcome. Just shake your hand before you go. Congratulations. In addition to the lovely award certificates that we're giving, we're also going to give members this year, or the winners, not members, but the winners, a 1-year membership to the Sustainable Business Council. Several of these folks are already members, so we'll be just paying for a year for them. For the 1 or 2 of you who are not members, we will be giving you your 1st-year membership for free. So, our second category here is the Sustainable New Venture of the Year. We were looking for a business or a non-for-profit that is within their first year, year and a half, 2 years, that is already showing all the signs of a sustainable business and already working very hard to support the Missoula community, environmental and social issues. This particular business, it was interesting, we ended up with another firm that's involved in the recycling area. Based on the nomination that we got, they are very strong as the business products that they're putting out this year are really exciting and great to have in this community. It's new to the community, something we haven't had before. And they've also spent a tremendous amount of time already helping out with a variety of projects around town where they're providing their services. One of them in particular, the Triangle Park project, the SBC's been monitoring and helping with when we can. And we've been real excited about that. Our new venture of the year this year is Construction Site Services. And if the Fishers will join us, we'll get both of them up here. Michelle, we don't get you as well? Come on, Michelle. Michelle and Bruce Fisher are the owners, and Rebecca is their marketing guru. And we're real excited to have you all come tonight to accept this award for construction site services. They are a company, well, maybe I should let you guys give the spiel about what you guys do and what you've been doing for Triangle Park Project and some of the other projects around town.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say I'm very honored. Thank you very much. We didn't realize what would happen to what is happening to our business, especially after today. Rebecca and Michelle put together a full-page ad in the Missoulian, and the phone has just been going off the hook, and we're scared. I thank my maker, my creator every day for Rebecca and Michelle, because if it wasn't for them, I had no need to be here. So, thank you so very, very much.
I just want to add to that for those of you who don't know about us. What we do is we recycle construction waste. It's a very new concept for Missoula. You probably know of Home Resource. People can take construction materials there. But what we do is we work with builders on site, and we actually collect things like cardboard and metals, and we also grind up a whole bunch of things like wood and concrete block and asphalt shingles and drywall. And those materials can then be used on the construction site for aggregate or soil amendment or landscaping. And it's a whole educational piece to bring to the building community. And so we'd love for you guys to help us. If you know any builders, let them know about us. And we were involved in Triangle Park, and we're also helping out. There's a project called Make My House Green. I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's a group of people who've bought a house and they've totally gutted it, and they're going to make it green, and they've gotten lots of different people in the community to donate their services to do this, and we're one of those people. So also be looking for that. And thank you so much.
All right. Congratulations. Our next award will be the Sustainable Nonprofit of the Year. This particular entity is actually also fairly new in the community in its current form. We used to refer to it as the Missoula Co-op. It is now Missoula Community Market. And they, should I let you clap there? Missoula Community Market is an organization that they just recently purchased a space, so they now have a store where not only they can run their co-op operation out of there, but they can also have sales of things that aren't through the co-op. And they're looking in the future to put in a shared use kitchen, I believe, a commercial kitchen, and some other assets that will be at the site. So environmentally, they're already promoting sustainability through the products that they handle, because they offer local and sustainable produce through the co-op. And we've also noted that socially they've become involved in a variety of projects. One of them is the, I'm not going to remember the name of this, the Meals, no, not Meals on Wheels. I'm hoping Kate can help me here. What is the, Real Meals for Women is a project where they're once a month bringing in low-income women to help them learn some cooking skills and how to use organic and other products in their recipes and things. So when we looked at the Missoula Community Market, we found that they were doing a variety of things in the community that we were real excited about. Kate, can I get you to come up and accept the awards? Congratulations.
Thanks so much.
Would you like to say a little bit?
Yes, I have a fair amount to say, because it's because the course of our evolution has been so confusing for the community, and our partnership with the North Missoula Community Development Corporation Executive Director Bob Oakes, sitting right there, has allowed us to occupy a space in their building over at 1500 Burn Street, and the co-op largely was generated out of the North Missoula Community Development Corporation, and we are legally incorporated as a not-for-profit cooperative association as of January of this year. So we have 350 members. Several of them are in this room. And we anticipate opening a small store in the building at 1500 Burns Street by mid-July. And we'll be running regular local produce and other local products out of the store on a more regular basis. And I also want to, I was so honored and befuddled and baffled by receiving this award, so I want to thank you, and I want to thank all of the people that are working tirelessly and behind the scenes. Bob Oakes, Molly Moody, Chelsea Pennick, who's sitting to the left of Bob, who's on our board, and all of our members who make that happen. So it's an honor for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Okay, so now we know I don't always keep all my facts straight, but I was close. Anyway, the final award that I'm going to give tonight is the Sustainable Advocate of the Year Award. And I think our mind must have been running along similar streams when we were looking at all these the nominations that we had. And we did have 3 or 4 for each of these categories. But when we came to the Sustainability Advocate of the Year, the board who made the final decision felt that Bob Oakes from the North Missoula Community Development Corporation was the best representative we had this year for a sustainability advocate in Missoula, someone who is doing on-the-ground work here in Missoula that we see consistent progress over the years. And so we wanted to award Bob our Advocate Award. Can I have you come to me, Bob? Let me shake your hand, and I'll give you this. And I had this long list of cool things that they were doing at the North Missoula Community Development Corp this year, and I of course left it at home. I know they're doing some very neat new housing projects on the north side, and I'd like Bob to explain some of that if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. We're going to be, I don't think I need this. We're going to be building 18 new units of housing right next to the co-op at the 1500 Burns Street site. Should be pretty neat. We think there's going to be a nice symbiotic relationship between the two of them. There's actually a housing conference going on in town here now, and I spent the afternoon doing a tour of some of the affordable housing projects, and we were happy to be able to show Clark Fork Commons and Whittier Court as well. Clark Fork Commons is on the river down near the Russell Street Bridge, and Whittier Court is near Mud over on the north side. So that was a neat experience. So, yeah.
And
Thanks.
we really appreciate your efforts to bring good housing into Missoula community and the
Thanks.
north side.
Thanks, and you can learn all about what the NMCDC does by checking out our website at www.nmcdc.com.
All right.
And
Thank you.
without even being asked to, I wrote an essay on what sustainability means to me.
All right. You want to read it?
It's kind of long. I have 15 copies, and I'll leave it on this table here.
All right.
And you should all share, because that's what it's about, is sharing.
Right. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Bob. Okay, and I guess I'm not allowed to give the last one, is that right? The board voted early in the year to give this one without my being involved, so.
So you'll never figure out who this one's going to. Clipper right here. Missoula Sustainable Business Council is really making a quantum leap here in the next couple of years. We just finished a strategic plan, and it's been all volunteer up to this point, and we've held our own. I think we've done a good job. But we're looking at hiring an executive director, maybe some staff. We're getting the funding in place. We have some big projects ahead, maybe a buy local campaign, a number of other things in the works. And we would not be here today if not for one woman, Susan Anderson. She has been the driving force behind this, no doubt about it. And it's been a pleasure working with her. And we've got a small award here, but we also have some art that was picked out by Lisa. And this is a local artist who works in recycled glass materials. Nikki Robinson, correct? And a vase for you to take too.
Right.
So,
I don't know if there's the lights better. Gorgeous. Thank you so much.
again, we're here because she's here. So, thanks.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much. And I'm not going to say any more than that. Tonight, for our final sustainability lecture of the year, we have Don MacArthur from MacArthur Means and Wells Architects here. They have been actively involved in a variety of sustainability projects around our community and in other communities. And Don is going to provide some case studies in sustainable community design for us tonight. And I'll let Don take it from there. How's that sound?
Thank you. Sorry for being late. First of all, I heard Bob's comment as I walked in the door. Oh, damn. He showed up after all. It's been one of those days running around from place to place. As Sue said, I'm Don MacArthur. Here to talk a little bit about sustainability in the community. We're architects. We also do some planning, urban planning, land use planning. And I wanted to talk about some of our projects, but also a little more broadly about what it means to be a designer, I think, and focusing on sustainability, a bunch of different levels. Before I get into our projects, I want to talk a little bit about about Missoula and about where we are, and maybe that'll sort of tie into what it means to do sustainable design in our minds. Everybody probably knows a lot of these statistics, but let me run through them just to sort of put them out there, keep them in mind for this talk. The Missoula County is just over 100,000 people now. It's been growing 2%, 2.25% thereabouts for a while. So at that growth rate, we'll be 150,000 in 20 years. So half again as big in 20 years. We're changing pretty fast. The city's just over 75,000 now, the urban area. You know, Missoula, when I first came to it, I've been here about 13 years now, 14, maybe 15. And it's going by fast. It struck me as being a town that was just poised to be a city. You know, it was just kind of making that transition between being a town feel to being big enough to have urban amenity, urban energy. And as we're growing, as we've changed in the last 15 years, that town scale infrastructure that I think is what we still have. You know, we still have the roads that were set up when we started 120 years ago. We don't really have a lot of new roads. We're starting to make a few new ones at the perimeter now, but mostly we're still using those same roads that were set up for a pretty small town. So there's some questions about, is that infinitely scalable? What do we have to do as the community grows and grows and grows? What do we have to do at the core? And what do we have to do all the way out through to the edges of the community to make it sustainable? So that's a thought. We are a pretty low density city, if we're calling ourselves a city, which I like to say as many times as I can, urban city, because I think that's our future, even if it's not our today. So we're the urban core. There's low density residential at the urban core. There's pretty low density commercial at the urban core. There's low density residential spreading out pretty evenly all the way from the urban core out to the fringes of development. You know, it's not there's not a lot of hierarchy, there's not a lot of places where we get to greater density. OPG has done some studies about how we use land. We use more and more land per dwelling unit rather than less and less land over time. They've done some studies. They go back and they look at you know, how many acres are being used per dwelling unit. It's more now than it was. There are less people living in that dwelling unit than there used to be. We got a lot of topographic constraints in Missoula. We're at the confluence of river valleys, steep banks, steep hillsides on either sides of us. There's quite a bit of floodplain area. There's not a lot of developable places to go. Some, but not a ton. So there's a question about the relationship of the infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, to our growth patterns and to our topographic constraints. What does that mean? I guess what that means is that the road systems that we have are pretty constrained by going up and down rivers. You know, the 93 down the Bitterroot, there's not a lot of other routes. We don't have a lot of ways to build capacity for our transportation system as we go out our river valleys, particularly down the Bitterroot, up the Rattlesnake. We're pretty constrained. Have some other things that are happening in Missoula County. Plum Creek lands are all being sold. I don't know if everybody, probably most people here know this, but Plum Creek owns some incredible percentage of the privately owned lands in Missoula County. Does anyone know what that percentage is? Plum Creek? Plum Creek knows, yeah. It's something phenomenal. It's, you know, it's 10% or 15%, or that may even be low. That may be of the total county, not just privately held. But they own a tremendous amount of land. It's being sold. You know, I think their plan is to sell it within 10 years. Most of that land is at the urban wildland interface. You know, right where development is the least sustainable, in my opinion, right where we're kind of going from the river bottoms up onto the hillsides. So there's a lot of land that's turning over because of Plum Creek selling. There's a lot of land that's being turned over as ranches are sold. So there's a tremendous amount of activity as land is changing ownership, and usually that ownership pattern is going from large tracts to suburban residential tracts. Fire protection. You know, one of the issues that we talk about as we think about these people building around the perimeter up on the hillsides is how are we going to protect them from the fires? The fires are going to get worse as global warming accelerates. We will have more and more houses at risk in risky areas, and less ability to quell those fires. And probably shouldn't be trying to stop those fires. Land costs are rising. Everyone knows this. You know, the value of houses it keeps escalating. Somebody told me that the median price is now $220,000. Is that right, Bob?
225 in March.
225.
Sales in March.
And that, you know, I know a number of people looking at houses. That median price of a house usually buys something that it's not like the median house that you're buying. It's a house that has flaws and probably needs work immediately. So that cost shows that the cost of land is very high. There's a lot of money flowing in to both Missoula, but more importantly, maybe into Montana from urban areas where there is a lot more money. So I think it's a interesting thing to think about. How does that affect our community? How do we sustainable within the face of this money that's coming from other areas? How do the people who live here, you know, how do we maintain a diverse community and all that, those issues? You know, I grew up in Vermont, and I go back there every summer, and I'm always surprised that in Vermont, where there are probably 25 million people within a 4-hour drive, that the land is cheaper in Vermont than it is in Montana. And it strikes me that Montana is uniquely the focus of attention for investors from the whole West Coast and even from the East Coast. There's just a tremendous amount of money being focused on Montana right now. And that is it's scary, but it also presents an opportunity. The last best place thing, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a really interesting question. I have this discussion often with my business partners, and they say, well, gosh, Montana is just so much more beautiful than Vermont. And I say, well, not really. I mean, Vermont is really, really beautiful. And so is Montana, but it's, you would think that people would actually go where it was convenient to get to, maybe for a weekend, but surprisingly, I think people are more interested. The real money is the people who want to fly to the exotic, and we're more the exotic, I think, for more people. Yes.
You mentioned a diverse community. Can you give me your definition of what a diverse community is?
It's a community where all socioeconomic classes can live and prosper.
So socioeconomic.
Socioeconomic, ideally, there'd be racial diversity too. So farmland, the last thing I wanted to say about sort of the general trends is the question about farmland and whether we can produce food in our valley and whether we will be able to produce food in our valley in 20 years. And as we increasingly spread out, I think this is, I read more and more things about the industrial production of food, and certainly there are many folks in this community who are doing fabulous work. Bob certainly one of them, but Pease Farm folks and Josh Slotnick who are doing fabulous work about thinking how we can reintegrate our food production with our urban places. And I think that's really important and interesting sustainability-wise. I think that I sit on the planning board, and every 2 weeks I see another subdivision that comes forward. And one of the criteria we're supposed to judge subdivisions on is there a loss of farmland as a result of the subdivision? Nearly every time it says this is either a farmland of local importance or prime agricultural soil, which is the highest category, that is being put into subdivision. And that's not sustainable. And we need to, as a community, we need to evaluate how we're going to keep farmland so that we don't have to raise houses in order to get it back when we need it, which isn't going to be that long. Okay, so now that was my long-winded introduction. I've got some slides. Sustainability means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I just got back from a conference in San Antonio, the AIA, which is the Architects Association. 24,000 people, all there to talk about sustainability. The conference title was Going Beyond Green. And nearly every talk there, 3 days of people talking about sustainable design, which is terrific. To think that our profession is really starting to embrace it. But it was interesting also to see the different definitions that each person had, and a lot of them were not, in my opinion, weren't going nearly far enough. It's the organic vegetable kind of thing. It's the labeling of sustainability that may be just regular good practice rather than sort of thinking in a more regenerative kind of way, a way to heal with our buildings rather than just do a little bit less badly. So hopefully, I don't know where I can stand that people can see, but this is actually a slide from a presentation that I gave at that conference, the AIA. And going beyond green for me, there was the first couple of 4 or 5 things, or I think the sort of typical definition of sustainability in architecture, which is more about green building, trying to do things in a healthy environments way, good indoor air quality and those kinds of things. Life cycle costs, so that you're building buildings that last a long time as well as not costing a lot to build up front. And you can read them all, but what I wanted to highlight really was the ideas that are at the bottom that I think need to be part of our definition of sustainability as designers, to really get at the sort of bigger picture of our community as a cultural, social entity. And social justice issues, connection to food production, cultural continuity, how do we work within the framework of what's already beautiful here in the history of our community. Always thinking about how we make a better community with each intervention that we do. And also at the end, kind of being really focused on how we engage the community to make decisions for this. So it's not just here's the designer coming and handing something down, but trying to work together and understand what the real basis of the design should be. And one thing that's not on here that I think is really key to sustainability is beauty. It's kind of a word that architects shy away from, but I think that in order for people to love buildings and engage with them, there has to be delight in them too. You have to love what that is, just for the way light plays over it, or colors, or form, or excitement, or the way it is to be inside of it. So I think beauty is a key part of sustainability too. Yes. So this is an almost totally illegible slide. I wanted to show about 4 or 5 projects, and I probably will zip through some of them and go fast through others of them. This one, probably not too many people have seen this. There was a competition that Homeward put on about maybe, there's probably a date on here that can't be read, maybe 3 years ago. And they had the idea that one of the key places in Missoula to think about was the future of the Brook Street Strip. It's an aging commercial strip. Most of the buildings are ready for refurbishment or renewal. So they said, well, gosh, look at the Kmart parking lot, which is down somewhere way down there, almost off the screen. And what could we do with the Kmart parking lot? We looked at it and we thought, well, the Kmart parking lot is really only a small piece of what that whole strip is about. And what we really ought to do is have a whole new vision for the community that transforms these places that are sort of eroding, these kind of eroding linear cores of our city, transform them into something that is exciting and new. Again, you can't read much of it, but this yellow line down there represents a light rail line. And the conception was what we need to do to be sustainable as a community is to recognize that core that is coming up from the Bitterroot, that there's no more room to make cars go through there. There's more people who are going to come up, but there's no more room. And all we can do is build bigger and bigger roads. And those roads aren't going to make our city better, in my opinion. So our notion was, okay, well, let's get people out of their cars and put them into a rail system, and let's develop a whole corridor that supports that. The rail system, to be effective, a rail system needs 15 or 20 dwelling units per acre nearby it, walking distance to it, in order to get enough ridership. Well, we don't have anywhere in our city that meets that criteria. So the real question here is, how do we take this core? We've got an opportunity. There's a whole, and the darker line here was my arbitrary line that I drew on there that looked like, from the aerial photos, that looked like this area is going to be redeveloped in the next 10 or 15 years. Those shopping centers that are aging. The mall might not like the fact that they're inside the core, but not that those uses would all have to be turned over either. I think the mall could be incorporated into this scheme, and would in fact love to have a Southgate Mall terminal that was right there and could get a whole new pedestrian flow to them. So the idea, just very quickly, is that the dark line here would be subject to a rezoning package, and the rezoning would be not only to allow more dense housing, but to prohibit less dense housing. To actually require that every time you do a project in one of these areas, you have to build to the density that's required to support a light rail. The circles here, these are quarter-mile radius circles, and that's kind of the accepted amount of distance that most people will be willing to walk and not get into a car to get to their services. So the idea was maximize the amount of this darker area that was within that easy quarter-mile radius to a train stop, and all of those people could circulate all the way to downtown, and hopefully there would be branches that maybe went out to the airport or went to the university over time, but a whole new vision that we don't always have to be in a car. We can live in this community maybe without a car. That's really part of the vision, and part of the vision of a community that is sustainable in the diversity realm is that not every person who has less means has to spend all their income driving a car. I mean, right now, people who are poorer are living in the perimeter and spending an awful lot of resources getting from Clinton or wherever to Missoula and back, and never can accumulate enough money to generate mortgage payments and other things that allow wealth production over time. So the other idea is that we would go back and we would really look at the infrastructure, not just the road infrastructure and the train infrastructure, but we'd look at pedestrian infrastructure. And we had the idea that, well, maybe we just go ahead and use the Bitterroot line that's out there and continue and try to hook up all of these nodes to that Bitterroot trail along here where the old rail line is, and hope that over time that gets abandoned completely and becomes a great pedestrian trail down to downtown. So we don't necessarily have to make Brooks function as a great pedestrian trail system. We've got another option there. So probably a lot of you have been to Portland. Portland has the on-the-ground streetcar kind of things that are very low intensity. You can drive over the top of the rails. They don't have to be a great big high intensity, big cost, big upfront cost train to make it work. So I think this was a visioning exercise, and it was going back to sort of look at what do we do as a community to think outside of our standard things, and to recognize that some of our issues are really core issues about infrastructure, and we can't sort of just incrementally do small little steps and fix our infrastructure to the point where we're really sustainable when we grow half again as big, twice as big in another 20 years. So I think we're right now at the cusp where this is what we need to do, I believe, as a community. We need to go forward with vision, and whether it's this exact scheme, but it's a scheme that says we're going to re-examine the whole concept of how the car fits into our community, and maybe we're going to make some choices that go a different route.
I have a question.
Please.
I know this might not be a popular one, but I don't think that malls are really good things. I'd like for us to envision, to think beyond the mall. What would we do instead of the mall on the space that the mall covers?
Well, malls that sort of mall isn't really being built very much anymore. People are doing different kinds of more pedestrian-friendly shopping centers. And I think the mall even is sort of thinking about their next moves. What would we do to change the mall? The things that I'd like to do personally is to change the parking strategy of the mall. And break it down and make it somehow pedestrian friendly. The fact of a group of shops coming together, I'd love to have those in a neighborhood center rather than in a auto-oriented destination, but I think it would really change the feel of that if there were all of a sudden, and I forgot one of the key statistics. One of the key statistics is we could put, at the density that we were proposing here, that dark area would be home to like 35,000 new residents. So if we thought about 35,000 new people coming in here who were within walking distance to a train station that was within easy walking distance to the mall, then maybe the mall would start adapting to a different character because of the number of pedestrians coming to it. Yes?
To what extent, well, I mean, it seems pretty apparent maybe, but are a lot of these sustainability initiatives, whether it's light rail. I mean, I love the Portland
Yeah.
streetcars, I'm sure.
Right.
Or glass recycling are dependent on having just a lot more human bodies here, and that there's a
Yep.
critical mass for sustainability that sort of needs to be reached in terms of population and
Yep.
maybe things like fed upness, like drive around at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in Missoula. And
Yep.
I'm just
Yeah,
wondering if we need 20 more years and 20 more years of growth to push us into it.
right. I mean, that's certainly the pattern of, this isn't a popular sentiment, but the pattern of planning in democracy is that you don't really get good planning until it's too late. It takes a lot of vision as a community for the people who aren't maybe in this room, or the people who are just sort of sitting back and watching things. They don't really get mobilized until things are bad. And we have an opportunity right now to shift that course to where we do something good before it's bad. And that's what, as a planner and an architect, that's what I want to try to do. But how do we get there? The other thing that you raised, I think, is a really good one for transit, which is the sort of chicken or egg question. We can't support the transit without density of housing. We can't do density of housing maybe without the transit. So that's a really interesting question of how do we grow those two things together. And I think some of the communities, Portland has done some transit-oriented development where they say, okay, we're going to go out into this spot and there's going to be a train stop out here 5 miles away, and boom, 5 years later, there's a community right there that's transit-oriented. So, how do we get that sort of vision, and how do we do it so that it works well? I don't know. Yes?
I guess I really like the idea of the light rail running there, but I wonder, when you went to this big conference in Texas, do you guys get together and you talk about, carrying capacity, for instance, of this valley? I mean, I went to some Native American holy people who, for the first time in 100 years, gathered at the university this last August, and they said the carrying capacity when the tribes were through here was about 3,000 people total in the summer. But we have this petrochemical economy where we keep thinking we're going to be able to keep growing and growing and growing, and I understand you're coming from the place that, yeah, if we keep growing, 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 we're going to need to do this, but at some place it's going to break. This pressure that you're calling increased population or whatever. And are people planning for that eventuality?
Well, there's a lot to that question. I believe myself that the carrying capacity, we don't live in we live in a different society. Transportation is a lot different than it was 200 years ago. We certainly are moving goods and services around. We operate in a lot different realm. The carrying capacity is a lot different for any individual city, and we're mobilizing resources from the whole world into Missoula, Montana. Do I like all that? Not always, and I'd like to be a lot more local for a lot of reasons. But the reality is we are concentrating our goods and services here, and we are going to grow, I believe. And the notion of we're reaching our carrying capacity and we're just going to stop it, well, no one's ever really done that effectively. I mean, Boulder said, okay, we're going to put this limit on ourselves and no more development outside this spot. Well, it didn't work. All it did is gentrify their community to the point where there's no diversity anymore. And then everybody has to drive through a 20-mile ring that goes around Boulder. I mean, so it's a kind of a question about, there's two things about it. One is that I believe myself that the carrying capacity, the sort of psychological carrying capacity, the place where Missoula is a great place to live in, that could be a huge population from if we design ourselves well. The carrying capacity of the planet and how we each affect that, that's a whole other question. I'm going to try to keep moving on that so I can show a few of these projects. Why don't we go to the next one? this is, some of you may have seen or followed this project, but this is another project that we were working on that's a planning project. This is a real project, not a visioning project. So Target Range School is right about here. South Avenue goes along here. This is the Bitterroot River. This is Macaulay Butte, for those who may know that. I wish I had a better sort of slide. This is the JTL gravel pit right over here. So the parcel, it's a development project. The parcel is about 300 acres. It has a mile and a half of riverfront or something like that. And the question, the developers came to us and said, gosh, we want to do something that we have to make money. That's what we're about. We're a private money-making developer, but we want to do the right thing for the community. And what we think are the right things for the community are preservation of open space, preservation of culture, access to trail systems and future connections of trails, and how do we do those things and still make money. So we looked at the property and we identified that all this property from here to about here is on the butte. It's some beautiful saddles and rolling hills, and it's in the view shed of probably half of Missoula. I mean, there's a huge number of people who see this, and all the Target Range folks who live up here who are rapidly being subdivided into 1 acre parcels, their rural heritage, and hopefully, I don't know if is there anyone from Target Range area here? A couple of folks back here. There's a lot of things that are, every parcel that's a 5 acre parcel, seems like when I drive out there, there's a new subdivision happening in there, and they're being cut into 1 and 2 acre parcels. And that beautiful rural heritage with horses and apple trees and things is being turned into a suburban culture. It's going to happen pretty fast. So we had this idea, well, we could at least not do that and not sprinkle a whole bunch of houses on the top of the hill, but to look at how we could just do 1 cluster subdivision. This area right here is about 25 acres of the 300 acres. And that is the only area that's being subdivided, quote unquote subdivided. And one of the interesting things about it is that this JTL property that whole piece of land fronts onto is going to be a city park in the year 2010, 11, something like that. So the notion was, well, it's going to turn over, this is going to be an amenity rather than a detraction, and we're going to orient our whole development with a notion that we're going to do compact, small lots. There's not going to be a lot of open space within the development, but there's a tremendous open space and ability to spread out into the whole landscape that we preserve by, instead of putting these over the whole 300 acres at 2 per acre or 1 per 2 acres, we put them all here. So there are some ideas about the commons, I guess, is a word that I like to think of, is how does each project sort of contribute more than for the lots that we create or the project that we create. How does it make something that helps the whole community and makes a bigger sum than the parts might suggest? So if you go back for just 1 second, it can't be done. Some of the amenities that are being given over time, there's a notion, well, there's a piece right here that the developer owned that is going to be turned over to this park, so that the park actually does have river frontage, which it doesn't have otherwise. There's a notion that there would be a trail system that would allow you to get up to the top of the butte. The developers have offered a trail that would come over here and actually go to a bridge that, if money can be raised for a bridge, would go across and connect to the Blue Mountain trail system over there. So the idea is preserve open space, give trail amenity, make linkages. You could connect all the way to the Fort Missoula, right over here to Blue Mountain, and you'd have an incredible recreational opportunity. And that certainly helps this development, but it helps the community as a whole too. It's kind of a win-win. So we could do the next one. So that was at the edge of the community. What can we do when there's a lot of greenfield development? How do we make greenfield development better? Greenfield development being development in never before developed parcels. This is a project that we're working on that is it's redevelopment of the Intermountain Lumber parcel on Russell and behind the Good Food Store a couple blocks north of the Good Food Store. And it's a 12-acre parcel. And let me see where I am on my notes, somewhere in here. So we had a new vision. This sort of goes back to that question about density. We had a vision that this project would be an urban project. Zero setback, kind of like the building we're in right now. It comes right out to the street, and there's life on the street. And instead of having green spaces that surround every building, small ones that don't really do much, we take all those green spaces and put them into a community park. It would actually be a city park that could be used by the whole community, but also was an amenity for our development. So 12 acres, proposing somewhere 250, 270 dwelling units. So fairly dense enough to support mass transit if that becomes available in here. And thinking about underground parking. You know, one of the things that allows this to happen is that a lot of the parking is proposed to happen underneath these buildings, and maybe underneath this community park there's actually a layer of parking. So figuring out how to take the car and sort of make it a little bit less important in our environment so that we get more green space and more recreational amenity. Again, the idea is about trying to, if we do more density, we can concentrate and get new amenities. You know, we can maybe do a community center that becomes an amenity for the neighborhood because we're doing a larger scale project. It's not just a small one-off room in an apartment building. It becomes something that the community can use as a whole and makes a commons, greater commons. How much time do I have here? Okay. Okay. Well, I'll try to give a few questions time at the end too. If anyone, yes, do you have a question?
Well, I do have a question about the underground parking because I know they did that at the Orchard Garden.
Yes.
The latest homework project. And what sort of cost factor does that have? Because it seems like such a slam dunk way to, you know, it just seems like such an obvious way for hide the cars and green space. So is it significantly costly or?
Oh yeah. You know, I just spent half my day talking about that this morning. In fact, on this project, you know, people often think about car space, you know, per space kind of costs, and underground parking in this kind of a configuration, numbers are thrown around $20,000 to $25,000 per space. You know, a typical surface parking space maybe costs I don't know, $2,500, $3,000, something on that order. So it's 10 times, but as land value goes up, that's the only way to support it. You know, if we can look at this whole thing and get half again as many units in there, then it still may pencil out. And it's just a changing sort of idea about what the appropriate density is. But recognizing that as we go higher density, we have to increase our infrastructure. We have to do underground parking. We can't, you know, up on Wyoming, there's a multifamily project, hopefully nobody lives there, that is like the bad example everybody talks about. Cars are all over the street. You can't drive by it. You can't walk by the sidewalk because there's 14 cars that go across the sidewalk. And the infrastructure wasn't there. You know, the parking infrastructure is not there, the park infrastructure is not there. All those things that are part of the commons. You know, the car sort of lives out in the commons, and if you don't do a good job with it, then it makes the commons a diminished place. If you do a good job of it and you put it underground, you know, one of the things that, if you look at our strategies here, all of these units, the idea is that we create beautiful streets. This is the main street along here, and there's no cars parked on it. You know, there'll be parallel parking the way we have out here, but all the parking lots, you know, there's cars that access in here, there's cars that come in there, there's cars that are hidden back in here. But every time we create nice streets where they're fronted by trees and by front porches and those things, and the car doesn't diminish that public realm. Better keep moving here. Uh-oh, you did it now.
Did it now.
Yeah, you have to press up and down rather than, yeah, there you go. All right.
Left and right before. I don't know why I changed his mind.
Okay, well, this is a quick perspective that we did of that last scheme. This is standing in the middle of Russell Street looking north, and our thinking about what the character of those buildings might be, 3 or 4 stories along Russell, and that instead of making Russell into an arterial that is all about moving the maximum number of vehicles per hour, that maybe we pull up a little hip strip sort of imagery where there's parallel parking along Russell and it creates a little friction along there. And that car not only maybe slows these folks down a little bit, but it also creates a buffer zone so that it's possible to have a cafe that sits out there. We start to develop a catalyst for a different pedestrian vision of Russell Street. Something that's not all about getting the maximum number of cars moved through there. Next one. Yeah. Oh, they're still going through there. They're just slowing. If you can go back. This is Russell Street. It's still 4 lanes. This is a median that we thought would be a good idea. And this is actually, I think, what the proposed current alternative shows, a landscaped median in it. And then there'd be 2 more lanes going the other direction. But our idea is that we'd actually pull our sidewalk into our site, give up some of our site to create a wider right-of-way, if you will, that would allow us to have cars parked there and a different kind of amenity. Yeah, I know. These guys are kind of, that guy looks like he's going the wrong way in traffic. All right. Yeah, he's in trouble. Let's go past this. I don't think go past that too, and keep going. Someone brought up the Orchard Gardens. We designed the gold dust, which we're right beside, and this is an aerial photo of the gold dust. And let's just kind of keep moving through there. Obviously, we're right there. This is a different sort of a project. Obviously, we're looking at how to maintain diversity in our community. One of the things we have to do is we have to maintain affordable housing, availability of affordable housing. And we have to do that within a context of making the housing, I think, beautiful and a vibrant part of our urban fabric. So some of the things that we're really focused on here is, this building doesn't look at all like the Stensrud building, but I think it still honors the sort of massing of it, and it recalls it a little bit. It tries to work within the rhythms of it. It's the same, basically kind of the same scale the end of it is. We were interested in the railroad heritage and the kind of simple, direct use of materials that railroad warehouses have. And so we tried to pull some of that imagery in here. We're obviously focused on how it's sustainability around some of the other issues about energy efficiency. Every south window has a shade on it, and you can see that they're being pretty effective in that shot. They're completely shading those windows during the summertime. There's quite a few of these slides. There's another shot. One of the things that also we can do with our buildings, and the idea of the sort of regenerative thing, is to give back to our neighborhoods. This project was a result of a really dynamic charrette with all the neighbors. There were about 75 folks who came to a design charrette at the inception of this project, and there were a lot of terrific ideas that came out of that. Some of them were roof gardens. There were some ideas about this site being sort of a catalytic piece for this neighborhood here. How do we get neighborhood center functions happening in here? Well, one of the things that we thought as an urban design move, and this isn't the greatest shot to show it, but people have probably been to the gallery that's on the first floor of that. That's kind of an invented, added piece of program that really has no function in the building as an affordable housing building. It only has a function as a piece of super important neighborhood interface That it makes it a magnet for the neighborhood. It makes it a place where vitality spills out from these doors onto the street every Friday, first Friday, and a lot of other times as well. So there was an idea of widening the street and creating some interest that our building could sort of give back to the community. Let's keep in, let's just cycle through that. One of the other things that we've tried to do is buildings have faces to the outside, and we always want to take care of those, but we also want to create places that nurture those who live in them. And people want to have, even at high density, this is 40 dwelling units per acre, the Gold Dust is, just to people who may be tracking those kind of numbers. We had the idea, well, 40 dwelling units per acre, that's pretty dense for Missoula. What's important here? Well, it's important to give people a place to play. There's a lot of kids who live there. It's important to give people a place to connect to the landscape. Montanans are very focused on, maybe getting their hands in the dirt or seeing the hills. And the higher density we put them, the more important it is that we come back and give opportunities for those things. This is the behind of it. If you look out that window, you can see it. And the idea that we can share drive aisles for cars with kids playing. Here's kids playing in their pool, pretty permanently set up out there last summer, and it works. I mean, you can do both. You can use those spaces for kids to play in as long as the queues are set up so people don't drive fast. They know that kids may be playing out there, and we can create new ways to use our spaces in multiple ways. Okay. This is a shot from the roof garden looking to the North Hills. The people, I don't know if how many people have been on the roof garden? Quite a few, almost everybody. I think it's one of the beautiful places in Missoula. You get this sense of being sort of up in an eyrie and looking around at all the hills in all directions. And it's in an affordable housing building. It's a great amenity. People have a tremendous amount of pride in it who live there. These are the individual garden plots. Yeah, that's what it looks like inside. These are sort of memories from another talk about sustainability, that these are all the features that we kind of did. We tracked the sort of more concrete features of low flush toilet, low water flush toilets, and how we insulated things. And it's important as designers to sort of keep track of these things and try to do better each time. It's probably not that salient for right now. Another one. We did orchard gardens as well, and this is obviously Reserve Street, and the river is up there. It's about a 4.5 acre site outlined in red. It's the site plan, and this again is kind of at the city-county interface. At the time we were looking at this about 4 or 5 years ago, most of the subdivision that has subsequently occurred farther to the west from this site, it was still pretty rural out there, and the people were really thinking this is a semi-rural community and it's going to be that way. And we had a design charrette for this project as well, and we heard a lot about that. We heard a lot about the beauty of the semi-rural heritage and the history of the Orchard Home subdivision. This is a part of a 1900s Orchard Home subdivision, which was all about small-scale food production in concert with residential. And so we thought we could come back and tie into that history and culture and local neighborhood understanding and do a project that was both double the density that is allowed by zoning underlying this, 4 per acre, this is 8 per acre, and still preserve half of the site to make gardens in. So this whole area here is going to be planted as an orchard. It's still not quite planted there yet, and they've already been working this as a garden last year. Garden City Harvest has been working that as a CSA style garden. And the 5 buildings around there house 35 affordable housing units. There's 20 units in here, 4 units in there, 5 units in there, 6 units in there, kind of a farmhouse style. And then this is a community building again that has both barn space for the gardeners and a community room that faces into a central courtyard. That's the farmhouse. And we tried to pick up the idea of the rural heritage, particularly on that face to Grove Street, which is where the neighbors were seeing it. The main building, you can see the underground parking that part of what allowed us to deal with the car successfully was to put almost half of our parking spaces under the building. And we designed the building very carefully so that that was cheap in this case, because the building fits just exactly over a double-loaded parking stall, so it was quite inexpensive. We used gabions, which are just wire cages with rocks for our retaining walls. All the lumber that's in these buildings is salvaged material, all the exposed lumber. These two buildings, again, the shading, these all face to the south. They kind of open up to the south, and the shading carefully designed for solar issues. Yeah, so let's stop here for a second. This is, again, the idea of an internal courtyard that really centers and focuses the development and gives the people who live within it a place to gather, as well as we try to have these inward-outward thing where we are very sensitive to the community as a whole, but then we create places of beauty within the development for you to go outside as well. An overview shot. The spreadsheet again. I don't think I know I don't have time to go through these, so skip through all this. We did some, I'll say a few words about it. We did some cool things on this project, and I'd be happy to tell people about them. But we did Goodwood. People may be familiar with Goodwood that Home Resource has. We created that in this project, that way of doing things. We did, here's some of it being used. We did the 100% fly ash concrete, which is, I don't know if it's ever been done successfully commercially before. We used that for a part of the project, and we had some flaws with it, but we were able to make it go ultimately. Yeah. So I'll go back for a second. The last thing I wanted to end up with is these projects. A lot of people think, well, sure, these are big projects. We can't. How do I as an individual do something that makes the community better? How do I practice sustainability? And I wanted to end up with a series of shots of just some small individual projects that we've done that are, a lot of them are remodels of projects in neighborhoods all around Missoula that people said, gosh, my house is, it's 900 square feet. I've got 3 kids. It just doesn't work. I need it to be 1,800 square feet. How do I do it? And what we try to do is to think of that as an opportunity for sustainability as well. It's an opportunity to invigorate our neighborhoods, to make our neighborhoods, bring new life, bring new personalities to the neighborhood. And a lot of the older houses aren't really that special. And when we go back, they're special as part of a community and part of a neighborhood, but we can make them more individual and better. And so some of the projects that, this is a house up on Raymond in the Rattlesnake, and this is what it looked like before. And then we basically doubled the size of it and tried to give it a little more personality, and still worked with all the existing landscaping. We'll just flip through that. Here's one that's on Central. This is the before shot, and this is the after shot. This one we more than doubled in size and tried to make it whole at the end of the day, and still fit into the sort of rhythms of the neighborhood. This is where is this house? Oh yeah, this is one that we just did on Woodworth, and I don't have a finished shot. It was just finished probably about 6 or 8 months ago. I should have a finished shot of it, but we do have a rendering that we did of it, and it does have this turret. And if you drive, it's about a half a block in off Arthur, and so it's a very modest little footprint of about, I think it's 750 square feet, and we doubled the square footage, went up and did some fun stuff architecturally, and tried to pick up some of the old. I've never done another place like this. It's kind of but it's fun to take the rhythms of the neighborhood and try to do some interesting things that riff off it. This is on Evans. This is my house. This is another house we did on Woodworth, and I don't have befores of these, but these are the after shots. We try to make front porches and really address the street, and pick up the rhythms of how the neighborhood works. This building back here is a new building. This is the existing house. This is on Gerald and Eddie or something, and so a new intrusion. And this is the last shot I'd show you that It's not sustainable in some ways, but it's back to that beauty concept that I think that it's really important to invest our time and energy into our places that we dwell. And this is a garden building of a woman who absolutely loves her garden, and it's a psychological sort of distillation of her love of that garden and the place, and it's something that is, I think, highly sustainable to invest so much into anything, even though the dollars that go into it are quite a lot. So I'll leave you with that. And anybody, I'd welcome questions. I've left about 6 minutes. Thank you.
Seems like, back to the macro development, seems like we're trying to get back, or get like Europe, where we got places to walk to, light rail, places like Portland that are getting to that. Is there a lot of pain involved because they say, okay, we need this, you guys are going to have to move your houses so that we can go through and create what we need to create? And if there is, like, how do we avoid that from Missoula?
You got me stymied there.
Is it political or is it like economic? Or because eventually you have to have a road that goes through, let's say, and then they do the eminent domain deal.
Yeah, and maybe other folks know of times that eminent domain has been used in Missoula, but I don't know of a whole lot in the last 14 years I've been here.
What about Portland?
I think they're a lot more willing to use it in communities like Portland, where Montana is a firmly a property rights state, and a lot of the things that we have as issues are really state law kind of issues. And the more that we as Missoulians may go and try to lobby the state to change the laws, the more likely they are to say no way. The state thinks, we're not the power in the state, the rural communities are the power. And the urban communities have a really difficult time getting their legislation through, particularly sort of progressive planning legislation. Well, what is that? Where's the hope in that? Where do we think we can go with that? Well, the way I think of it is that we have to do it privately. We have to go do our projects and come up with, as a community, we have to come up with ways to leverage our resources to do these projects privately and keep thinking about incremental changes that add up to bigger pieces, that commons idea. The light rail thing, that's a vision piece. That takes a change in our right-of-way, and maybe it does take some eminent domain. And I wish that we could come together as a community and say, here is the agenda. There are 3 things that we need to do, or 2 things we need to do, and we're all going to bring our energy into it and get it done. I think we could, but a lot of the folks in this room and other rooms that I've given presentations at have their own very valuable agenda items that they're working hard on, but they end up, although being basically parallel, they don't come work together on a single item, which is what we need to do, I think, to get the political will to make big things happen.
If you guys want to $10 a gallon.
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
That kind of gets back to the question and comment before about why people with money, why are property values so high? Why is it in flux? And a lot of it has to do with that. People are attracted here, not just for private homes, but for development, because it's a pro-property rights, pro-development, in a lot of ways in a healthy development manners that attracts money. It's hard not just to do things right, it's hard to avoid doing things wrong.
Well, there's
Montana's a bit behind, and there's issues in Vermont, for example. I bet it's harder to develop and mess up things in Vermont.
It's way harder to develop in Vermont. They've had for 30 years now, they've had this awful, as a developer, a very draconian system of laws that you have to do EIS statements and a lot of very hard things to do to develop, and it stunted development in Vermont, stunted. It stopped it, slowed it down, made their economy less vibrant, but in the long term, I think it's proven to be the right thing, and it has actually added value. And I think it's back to that commons idea. One of the things that we've tried to do with a number of developers, we've done a lot of vision statements for people with big pieces of land, where we go in and try to sell them what we think of as a sustainable vision for their piece of land. And where it usually, we have some developers who, like the folks at Macaulay Butte, Northern Lights Development, who are just so firmly on board with that it's the right thing to do that they're going to do it. But a lot of the people who are sort of on the fence and who think, yeah, we'd like to be sustainable, but show us what you mean. And so we do vision sketches, and we say, here's how we could cluster things. Here's how we can create a greater value. We believe a greater value in the development by preserving the value of the land and by creating open space and corridors and things that we think are sustainable. And the key question that comes up at the end of it every time is, okay, what is the value of these lots? And the problem is not that the lots are really less valuable, it's that nobody knows what they're worth. Because there are not 50,000 other of them in Montana that you can go do comps on. All the realtor people. That's what they want to do, is they want to say, well, there's another one over there that's pretty similar and I can sell that for $125,000. And when we take that 1 acre lot and we turn it into a 1/8 acre lot with a dynamite view, nobody knows what the value is. So that's one of the things that we need to get, is to get the vision. We need to get, as consumers, the vision to push for a different reality, spend our money in different ways, don't buy the same product, buy the product that's pushing the envelope, so that we keep moving that center a little bit. Bob, back there?
Looking at that Paramount lumber site when you showed that slide, it seems like maybe that could be a example of a car-free development, or at least a portion. The Gold Dust seemed to be pretty successful, but the Good Food Store, the trails, the transit.
Right.
Is it a matter of a developer saying, taking the risk of, okay, is there a market there? And I would think that we could attract people from around the country who would say that might be the type of living that is attractive.
I think, to me, I think the Gold Dust and Orchard Gardens are those kind of projects that they don't just take a little small step, they take big steps.
Does Orchard Gardens have less parking than?
No, it has all the parking required.
To me, there's a question there, particularly when you get into a project like that it's sustainable, it's also subsidized, affordable housing. The client that does that isn't the same as a private developer client. Why wouldn't they consider, if not a vehicle-less one, at least reduce parking to promote?
Well, the Gold Dust, where we felt like it was close to downtown, there was a trail system and an ability to actually connect in a bike way or with a bus system way to a lot of employment opportunities. We did some of those things, and there's three units in the Gold Dust that sign leases that say we will not have cars, and that was an experimental thing, never been done before, and it's worked out pretty well. I don't think there's ever been an issue with that. At Orchard Gardens, we decided, gosh, that is really out at the edge of the edge of the city county. The trail system really isn't developed through the whole of the River Road area. Yeah, basically, yeah. But back to Bob, your question, how do we get to that idea of car-free? My vision of the first project that I showed with the rail system was that we would have both lower limits of density allowed and upper limits of parking allowed for every development. So that the part of the zoning district would say you're not allowed to have any more than X number of cars parked. So maybe there could be zoning districts written for particular zones that were really supported by mass transit and by multimodal transportation and bike or pedestrian. and just go in there and do it, show that it has to be done that way. You had a question up here.
I was just going to state that, I've been out of Montana for 35 years, more than 35 years here than other places. But I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the reason why Missoula, it looks today like Pittsburgh looked to me when I was born and raised back there. I mean, gasoline was 28 cents a gallon back there, and I drove 70 miles round trip every day to go to school in Pittsburgh from Butler. But topographically, river and rail, Missoula is almost identical. So if you ever want an example of what's going to happen in Missoula, take a look at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It used to be a dirty, filthy town with all the steel mills and so forth. They're all gone now. And it's a beautiful town with parks and the universities and the institutions. And
They had real great planning. They had some people with vision in Pittsburgh too, though. And some leaders, as I understand, I don't know a lot about it, but I think they had a lot of leaders, business leaders, who contributed in significant ways to the creation of some of that. Big money. Yeah, right. Well, and we may not have big money like that, although we have some big money, but we can come together and try to get that private development to make shape Missoula too.
they drill holes through mountains. The holes are 40 feet in diameter to move cars through. But topographically, it's almost identical. They've got rivers coming together in town, and every cross street, believe it or not, has a bridge goes across the river.
I'm going to cut our questions and comments off. If you want to stay more to Dawn in a few minutes, you can. Will everybody help me in thanking Dawn for joining us? And real quickly in closing, I wanted to thank our sponsors for tonight, MCAT, who comes to film for us every month, the Stensrud Building for letting us use this unique facility, Posh Chocolate and Pizza on the Fly for the wonderful food we have over there, Authentic Creations, Tree Cycle, and Fungal Jungle for our door prizes. Don't leave once I get done here because I still have to give those away. And Big Sky Brewing is our beverage sponsor for tonight. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And one more time, let's give a big round of applause for our award winners tonight. Our Sustainability Award winners were Missoula Valley Recycling, Construction Site Services, Missoula Community Market, and Bob Oakes. And we want to wish them all the best. Have a nice evening, everybody.